Diary of a mid-30s girly.
Why do ADHD girlies keep things we don't even like? I call it the Hoarder Minimalist paradox, okay? And if you're stuck in it, that tension between your craving for calm and your very cluttered reality, I've got you. Now, disclaimer, I'm obviously not a doctor, but I believe that us ADHD girlies tend to drown in our stuff, not because we're lazy or because we don't care, but because our brains see a million possibilities in literally everything, which is great. Until, of course, those possibilities start costing you real time, real energy, life. Okay, so today we're going to talk about why having ADHD makes it really hard to not be a hoarder, why we need minimalism more than pretty much anyone else, and why we are the least likely to fuck with it, Marie Kondo, her very famous approach, and why it doesn't work for us, and of course, 7 tips that actually do. I'm Danielle, and this is Diary of a Mid-30s Girly, the podcast for the last bitch in her friend group to get her shit together, but not because she's not trying. Let's get into it. I want to start with the why. I scratched the surface with this already, but it basically has a lot to do with one of the quote-unquote strengths of ADHD, which is enhanced pattern recognition. A very out-of-the-box brain tends to think of things in a very out-of-the-box way. And that's great, like I said, until it's time to clean out your junk drawer. Because that's when an old grubby t-shirt, suddenly it's, potential rags, or maybe once you lose a certain amount of weight and happen to learn to sew, then you're gonna turn it into the crop top of your Coyote Ugly dreams, okay? We tend to attach so many possibilities to our objects. Now, obviously that quality is not necessarily unique to an ADHD brain. However, when you see potential in literally everything, you start to keep literally everything. Story time. When one of my best friends had her first baby, I remember that she had an old cardboard paper towel tube. She filled it with a bunch of dry rice. She taped the end shut, and suddenly her baby had a fun little DIY rattle. I remember being like, wow, that's so creative. That's so anti-consumerist. But now every time I finish a roll of toilet paper, this is what I think about, okay? Do you see how having this way of thinking can make every little thing a question mark, right? It's a cardboard tube, but maybe it's like a toy for my future baby. Maybe I could use it to organize my cords, Or maybe it's trash, okay? Imagine the mental gymnastics your brain is doing behind the scenes with the rest of your stuff. And so much of this is under the surface, but it doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. So your hobby graveyard, and pretty much every ADHDer has one, is not just an amorphous to-do list. It's also a shortcut to guilt and shame. And in fact, if this goes unchecked, your entire living situation could quickly go from artfully disheveled, as I used to say, to being a time capsule of all the stuff that you never got to do. I remember a couple years ago when Gabe and I moved into our first LA apartment together, right? It was a small studio, and I brought with me so many bins of junk that I could stack them 5 high, and they still cut almost all the way across, creating a wall between our bedroom area and our living room area. It was a studio, but you get what I'm saying, right? And what were those bins filled with? Scraps of fabric in case I learned how to sew someday. I'm never gonna learn how to sew. Bins of unopened mail that I was saving just in case. In case of what? I cannot tell you. That made me realize just how much mental weight my maximalist tendencies were forcing me to carry. So here's something I want to make really clear. Minimalism is not an aesthetic. Well, I mean, it is technically, but I'm not talking about minimalism, all the straight lines and the beige and stuff. And in fact, I think that misconception is what turns a lot of ADHDers off. You hear about guys like the minimalists who preach having fewer things, but then you look at their spaces and it feels very cold and I'm just gonna say it, boring, okay? How could people as interesting and varied and multifaceted as us ever live like this? I love bright colors. In case you couldn't tell. I love collages. I love all of that. But I've come to realize that in real life, I need neutral tones and clear surfaces. Okay. When you have ADHD, your internal world is already at max capacity. That's how I feel all the time, right? Like, I don't know how I could possibly contain another open tab in my brain. And so when you've already got that going on, and then you've also got an external world screaming at you all the time, the only way to not be overstimulated by all this stuff at times is actually for your brain to drown everything out. And if you've ever lost an important bill or a summons for jury duty to a I'll deal with it later pile, you know what I'm talking about, right? When you tend to leave everything out as a reminder to do stuff, eventually you forget all of it. But I'm not just talking about like very important things, very important tasks. I'm talking about little stuff too, okay? Every little picture frame, every little tchotchke on your desk is an item you're gonna have to dust in 2 weeks. Except if you're like me, you won't do it, which means you're gonna wake up 6 months from now or whatever and feel like everything you own is crusty, you're crusty, your whole life is crusty, okay? From someone who's been there before, it's not a great feeling. Now, rewinding a bit to talking about minimalism, the aesthetic, again, that often gets, what's the word I'm looking for? Not discombobulated, misconstrued, whatever. It gets mixed up with minimalism, the ethos, and I think it's an important distinction we have to make. If you're a colorful, funky bitch and you want a colorful, funky home, great, do it. That does not have to mean cluttered with stuff. First things first, God bless Marie Kondo, okay? I read her book years ago. I loved it. Obviously, her book has changed millions of lives, and I respect Marie Kondo. I really do. Her method, though, in my opinion, seems like it is designed for dopamine-rich brains, let's say. If I recall, one of the most important aspects of her framework is that you do things by category in a certain order. Now, I do understand the logic, right? It's about building momentum, the power of rapid transformation. Like, I get it. I really do. But if you have ADHD, you will burn out before you finish that first round of books. Obviously, I don't speak for every ADHD girly out there, but like I said, when I tried it, what I would end up with was like piles of things that would sit around for a few days, if not more, because I didn't have the dopamine to like power through the entire category. And even though your dopamine stores do refresh every morning, once you've gone through everything and like seen all the stuff you have, there's not really any like enticing novelty there to bring you back to it. So it just didn't work. Now, while I don't currently have a step-by-step framework the way that Marie Kondo does, what I do have is 7 tips, more or less in order, that I think will really help when you have a non-neurotypical brain. Number 1, start by decluttering your heart. I know that sounds cheesy, but I'm being dead ass, okay? I break this into 2 parts. A, let go of the past. This is where we really need to get honest, okay? Decluttering is seldom about the stuff. We all know that like sometimes you hold on to clothes that no longer fit because some part of you can't let go of like a fitter version of yourself or whatever. Okay, guilty. We keep art supplies for projects that we never finished. And that's easy to do. Like I said, when you have ADHD, you can always justify that you're gonna repurpose something. But if you wanna become someone new, you cannot be surrounded by stuff constantly that reinforces the person you used to be. I once heard about this therapist who would have these like transformational retreats with people, but something that they had noticed was that once they went back to their old environments with all their old stuff, it's like their environment would like drag them back into their old patterns. I'm not saying that you need to go out and get rid of every single thing that has some kind of memory attached to it, okay? Obviously not. But what I am saying is that if we want to change, we need to be curating these environments that support the next version of ourselves. And so part B is own that future. Think about who you want to be, how you want to feel every day, and how your home is going to play a part in that, because it is, whether you know it or not. So take some time before you get started to figure out what that means. And then based on that, develop your, I call them razor questions. Now, we've all heard like, oh, have I used this in the last year? For me, I really had to dig into every item with, does future me, a booked and busy really need or even want this thing, or would it just weigh her down? Tip number 2, with that future in mind, Forget about categories and focus on high leverage spaces. Start with the space that's costing you the most energy. For me, that was my desk. I am a small business owner and content creator, right? And so that is where I spend a lot of my time. And at this current moment in my life, my desk also happens to be like right next to my bed, which I wouldn't normally encourage, but that's a whole other story, right? So clutter there is very energetically expensive. It's always in my line of sight. And anytime I have to like move a little stack of mail to put my coffee down, it's like, ugh. You know, these are obviously first world problems, but I swear when you have ADHD and your brain feels like it moves like lightning, I really think you need to do your best to have your environment be able to flex and flow at that speed. Because otherwise, if you frustrate your brain, it's going to just want to default to something easier, like opening up TikTok. Caveat is don't fall into the trap of thinking something is high leverage just because you think about it every day. Does that make sense? I think a garage is a good example of this one. Like you might see your garage every day, like getting in and out of your car or whatever, and constantly think to yourself, oh, like want to clean the garage, right? And you should get to it eventually. But I do feel like that's not going to be as high leverage and have as much of an impact on you as cleaning out your closet might. You get what I'm saying? Once you're done with the most energetically expensive places, that's when I would encourage you to move on to the ones that help you most be who you want to be. If you're an aspiring fashion influencer, like getting things in and out of your closet has to be a relatively frictionless process, or else it'll just be too much of a hassle. And if you're anything like me, you will use any excuse to not film. This is literally why I film in a robe every day now, because can't be bothered to select an outfit. If you're on a health journey, a crock pot I have discovered is truly an ADHD hack for meal prep, honestly for everyone, but you know, really good for us because you can set it and forget it. But like, let's say the next version of yourself is someone like that. Well, are you going to use your crock pot if it's on the highest shelf behind a bunch of like reusable water bottles that you don't even actually reuse? Now, those tips were about the order to go in. This one is about the scope. Number 3 is manage the overwhelming / underwhelming paradox. This kind of goes back to my beef with Marie Kondo. Again, as much as I appreciate her, please do not gather all your things into a massive pile on the floor and convince yourself that you're going to get it done in one afternoon. It's probably not going to happen. But I do feel like it's a disservice to go to the other extreme. Some people are like, oh, just declutter like one drawer at a time. I'm gonna be honest, that's not impactful enough for me, right? It really doesn't create that energy shift that you need to really keep going. So here's my strategy for managing that paradox. Pick your high leverage space, right? Something that will genuinely make your life better, like once it's decluttered and clean and stuff, but go for something that you think is gonna take like an hour or two, knowing that it'll probably take 3 or 4, okay? And don't go any bigger than that. I feel like I keep using my desk as an example, but I feel like it's a good one. If I had just cleaned out one drawer, big whoop, won't feel that at all. But if I decided to do like my desk and my bedside table, my closet and all that stuff in one day, too much. It was just enough to like actually get it done in an afternoon while feeling viscerally the effect of what it's like to have a clear, clean working space where I can think and organize and do all the things I need to do. And even when I started running out of dopamine at the end, it felt almost inevitable to finish it because I was so close to the finish line. It is a delicate balance, but I do feel like this really matters. Tip number 4, manage your time blindness and distractibility in advance. Now, using a timer is pretty common advice when it comes to decluttering, but I feel like people always talk about it in a different way. They're like, oh, I'll set a timer for an hour and do as much as I can within that time, and then I'll be done. That works great for like 5 minutes, okay? Because of something I call the Dory effect. The Dory effect can best be described by that scene in Finding Nemo, you know, when Dory agrees to help and they're swimming along and then you see her start to kind of like slow down and you realize, yeah, she forgot what she was doing while she was in the middle of doing it, okay? This is a very common experience. In fact, this happens to me the most, I swear, when I'm like in the shower and like I'm trying to go somewhere. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a quick shower. But then, you know, once you start like sudsing up and stuff, it's just so easy to start being like, la da 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 da. And then you get out of the shower, it was supposed to be 5 minutes, it ends up being 20, right? Now, I have a hack for that, but let me not get distracted. So what I do now to avoid that happening in other parts of my life, and I recommend this for every ADHD baddie in all areas of life, honestly, and that is using a smartwatch and using the timers on there and setting them to go off incrementally at like relatively short intervals, actually, okay? This is huge because they're not as annoying as like those loud timers, right? I used to set a lot of timers timers on my phone, but every time it would go off, I'd be like, ugh, snooze, so annoying. Hated that. With this though, it's like every time it goes off, I'll feel that subtle but persistent vibration on your watch. And for me, it kind of like pulls me out of the moment in a good way and reminds me to check in with myself of like, oh, am I doing what I said I wanted to be doing at this moment? Or did I get distracted and like fall down a rabbit hole or start doing something else? You know, if it's a particularly distractible day or time is just of the essence, you know, I'll set it for 15 minutes, sometimes 10 even, okay, when it's really bad. But usually it's more like 25, 30 minutes. And this has really been a game changer to keep me on track, right? And when it comes to decluttering, which I do think is one of the most distractible activities that an ADHD person can find themselves in, right? So this is a game changer for that, especially if you don't have anyone to body double with. Number 5 is another very useful tip, and that is to process your thoughts and emotions out loud while you're decluttering, even if there's nobody around. First of all, something that I've noticed, not only with myself, but also with my clients, is that we tend to get stuck in something called brain gridlock. A good common example of this is the whole like, oh, I need to wash my hair, but I want to go to the gym, but if I don't, you know what I'm talking about. Now, I think this has a lot to do with the fact that our working memory tends to really suck. We really do our best processing externally. I am telling you, I can solve any problem in the world if I have a whiteboard where I can write it all down and be looking at things, right? And likewise, any weird logic loop that I find myself kind of stuck in, if I'm able to speak it out loud to somebody else, I discharge a little bit of that emotion, which is good. But also I always end up finding myself being like, okay, now that I've said that out loud, like, does it make any sense? And then like the answer is right there in front of you. Now, bringing it back to decluttering, I also recently learned that like literally talking to the item activates the verbal processing part of your brain, and that helps you release some of your emotional attachment, which now that I think about it is maybe why Marie Kondo encourages you to thank your things. I can't remember if she says we have to do it out loud or not, but yeah, like if you literally are like, okay, purple sparkly brush, we had a moment, but this isn't my vibe anymore, or whatever, okay? Apparently, that actually helps. Now, back in the day, I would have said that if you didn't have anyone to talk out loud to, then you could just ramble into your voice notes, right? I used to do this all the time. Now that we have ChatGPT, however, I talk out loud to ChatGPT all the time. I'm pretty sure you only get like 20-ish minutes of like the advanced voice mode every day, but there is a workaround. I found that it's really helpful for me to use like the regular text mode, but use the dictate feature. And then when it writes back in text, there's a little like speaker icon you can click on and it'll read what it wrote to you. So it's not totally hands-free, but it's relatively easy, you know? Number 6, delay decision fatigue and forget about perfect. Obviously, everybody gets decision fatigue, but us with our executive dysfunction, we are particularly prone to it, which is gonna really suck when you're trying to declutter all your stuff. But the best way I've found to kind of get around that is to delay that decision fatigue to the very end, as much as you can. So one example of this is like, you know how when people are getting rid of clothes, they usually like, they make a few different piles. You know, there's usually like a keep and a trash and a donate. When I had to clean up my closet last year, I did something just a little bit differently, and I found that it saved me so much time and made things so much easier. I was between my closet and my bed, and on the far left side of the bed was my keep pile, and on the far right side of the bed was my get rid of. And then I had 2 piles in between, and they were both maybe piles. But on the left side was maybe, but leaning towards keep, maybe get rid of, and really leaning towards get rid of. Now, it sounds extra, like more options, which in a way kind of sounds counterintuitive, but I'm telling you, like there was no like heavy emotional weight because nothing felt permanent yet. It's a lot less deliberation for that initial sweep. And then once you have your get rid of pile, then it's really easy to quickly go through, sell, donate, trash. Now, as far as dealing with your temptation to do things perfectly, I also think it's critical that you make an agreement with yourself early on that you're going to do your reasonable best to make the most sustainable choice. And also, there's a certain point at which if there's too much friction, your brain is going to give in and you're just going to hold on to this stuff. And we can't let that happen because it is costing you the energy that would allow you to go out into the world and make the changes that you want to see in it. This is why it took me so long to get rid of all these beauty products I'd been holding onto that just did not work for me, right? I couldn't return them. Most of them were so full that like throwing them out obviously felt very wasteful and I didn't want to do that. Donation places wouldn't take them though because they weren't brand new. And so the only place that I could find that would take them was a women's shelter. But if I wasn't willing to spend hours driving this stuff up, I'd have to mail it, which meant packing it in a box, taking it to the post office, paying for shipping, and maybe this will make me seem like an asshole, but it was just too much. And my brain had these questions of like, is it even gonna be worth it? Like, does anyone even want this half empty bottle of hair oil? And so yeah, I had to give myself permission to just throw this stuff away. And let me tell you, the way that felt so it left an imprint on me that was like, okay, you do not need to be buying random beauty products just because you can, just because you have an impulse. I know it works for me. I'm very happy with my current holy grail products. And me even bothering to try anything else would really just be me trying to like scratch a novelty itch. You know what I'm saying? So maybe I fucked up in the past, but now that I know what it feels like to be this wasteful, I don't have to keep giving into that temptation. Tip number 7, remember your criteria. Because you have impaired working memory, you are going to forget this razor blade question, the criteria you have for keeping your stuff. You're likely to forget why you're doing this, who you're trying to become, and instead get caught up in who you used to be. And so your best bet is to kind of safeguard against this in advance. Again, it would be great if you could have a decluttering buddy there with you, a friend, a sister, a partner, whatever. But if you are alone, it might not be a bad idea to like text your friend and say, hey, can you call me in an hour and just remind me like why I'm actually doing this so I don't just like fall into my old habits of keeping everything. Or maybe you set an alarm to go off in an hour. If you're decluttering your closet, you could make a custom alarm that says, as a booked and busy bitch, I do not have time to take all these clothes to the tailor. My booked and busy ass does not have time to find the perfect owner of every future item that I have. Now, once you've cycled through this process and through these tips, it's basically just rinse, repeat from there. Again, you just have to know, even though you could make a quilt out of every cool t-shirt you've ever owned, chances are the next level of you just doesn't have time for that. Unless it does, and that's like part of your vision, but you get what I'm saying. Fill in the blanks. Every bit of cognitive energy, physical energy, time that you spend cleaning this stuff, storing it, moving it out of the way, is costing you the life you would rather be living. Now, if you need help teasing out that version of yourself, or maybe you don't, but you just need an almost on-call accountability partner, I think you will love the hybrid ADHD coaching program I'm working on. It's launching very soon, depending on when you're watching this video. But obviously, until it's ready, you can still book me by the hour. If you're interested, you know where to go, you know what to do, etc., etc. So that's it for me today. I hope this video was helpful. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the comments.